We want to get going here. You're going to have to bear with us. These are all new toys for us, so if we don't push the right button, we don't stick our nose into it, it won't answer us. I'd like to call to order the agenda of the joint board meeting, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, Wednesday, February 20th, 2019 at 6:30, Colchester Town Hall, meeting room 1 and 2. I call the Board of Selectmen to order.
I call the Board of Finance meeting to order.
Number 2, the procedures of this joint meeting. We're gonna have a couple of ground rules here so that we can do this orderly. Walter will give the presentation. During the presentation, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance member are asked to do it. During the presentation, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance can ask questions. Second of all, when we finish with the presentation, we're going to allow 60 minutes for questions and answers from the citizens only, and they're going to be directed to Walter, because obviously he's the man of the hour right now. And following those questions and answers, we're going to have a straw poll or consensus of the people in this room of whether yes or no, and it's just a consensus, it's not binding in any way. So, Walter?
Okay, good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank both boards, Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, for allowing us to present this program tonight. My name is Chief Walter Cox. I've been a member of the fire department for 27 years. I've been Chief of Service since 2004. The Colchester Fire Department is a combination fire department. It's 90% volunteer, it's 10% career, but it takes both groups working together to provide the excellent services of fire, rescue, and EMS. The program tonight is a presentation of implementing a paramedic program internally from the Colchester Fire Department to the residents of Colchester. Currently, there is no dedicated paramedic for the town of Colchester. Only when and if a paramedic is available, primarily from Middlesex Hospital out of Marlborough or American Ambulance out of Norwich. The history of the Colchester EMS: in 1977, the Colchester Fire Department received its authorization from the Department of Public Health to provide first responder EMS. The total call volume in 1977 was 357, 121 which were medical calls. Compare that to last year, 2018, when we did 2,224 calls and over 1,400 EMS calls. We're going to be talking about revenue and expenses tonight, but the primary responsibility of the Colchester Fire Department is emergency response and patient care. The Colchester Fire Department bills for ambulance transports in a non-aggressive collection policy. If a patient has no means of payment, it does not go to a collection agency. It is a write-off. Our primary responsibility is to treat each patient professionally and transport, if necessary, to the closest appropriate facility. I would like to recognize several people in the audience tonight. Here with us tonight is Dr. Kyle McLean. He's our Medical Patrol Director from Bacchus Hospital. Also want to recognize Jim Santa Croce from Middlesex Hospital, who's the EMS Program Supervisor. Thank you both for being here tonight. To proceed with the presentation, I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, Charlie Jaskowitz. I've known Charlie for 27 years. He was an EMS instructor. He's a licensed paramedic in the state of Connecticut. He's a registered nurse in the state of Connecticut and currently working for Pfizer as a director. So without further ado, I'd like to present Charlie Jaskowitz. Charlie?
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, both boards, members of Colchester. My desire to help Colchester is because there's been a synergy in this town with myself and the fire service since 1976. Yes, I'm that old. But since that time, I went to school with members of Intercounty Ambulance and Colchester Fire Department EMT School, In 1982, when we started the first paramedic program out of Bacchus, Terry Tamicki was the pre-hospital care coordinator, and then Illa Cizzarelli. And I used to come to Colchester a lot to teach EMT classes, to teach advanced skill classes. And to be honest with you, I kind of love this town also. My mother was a nurse back when you had the Freedman Convalescent Home here. So I remember as a kid growing up in Montville Manor, we do our grocery shopping at the old Tri-Town, right where the CVS is now. So I do have an affinity for this town. I enjoy the town, and I've been asked to help out. So I'm going to present to you information on the paramedic program. I was a licensed paramedic practicing. I continue to hold my license. I don't practice due to some issues with age and being able to keep up with the young guys out there, but I still enjoy teaching and participating in the community. First thing I want to show you real quick is on the slide here, you see these two blips. These blips are what we call an EKG. Just right off the bat, one of the challenges for a paramedic is everyone says, okay, that's great. There's a heart rate of about 102, 104. How do you know? Well, you got to verify that what's on that screen is also on a patient's pulse. If not, it is very time consuming that certain drugs be administered to that patient right away. So as we start that, I'm going to refer back to that first slide when we get further on in a couple more slides in the presentation. What we have now in Colchester is you have basic life support. In other words, your ambulance provides basic life support, which is part of the tiered response system and is really key. I can tell you honestly, in all my experience, I did not save a life as a paramedic, not one. I saved a life as a team member because my EMTs, my R1 responders, my emergency responders did outstanding work so I could focus on the advanced life support of IVs, cardioversion, and all those advanced life support skills. And historically in Colchester, they've always provided great basic life support service, and that's what you do now. Where you want to be, like to be in ALS. Why? Geographically, we'll show you that it's a very ideal situation, and with the call volume, that it's got a benefit to the patients in Colchester, and it can be a very positive aspect within your town. What will it cost? The options, we're going to show you that. How we can get there and the plan. We're going to show it all to you real quick here, and make sure that everyone understands where we're going. What you currently provide in the town of Colchester is you have 49 square miles. Within that 49 square miles, you provide basic life support services called BLS. You have an emergency medical responders. The chief brought you some numbers back from the early 70s. That was that initial responders. Those are the emergency medical responders that respond from home with a kit to try to initiate life-saving skills on a patient right away. It could also be with a service truck. It's a non-transport type of intervention arriving to the patient's side until that transportation and ALS intervention can get there. Then you have emergency medical technicians. Those are the people that are also key to a good advanced life support. It's that good basic life support system that saves patients. Utilizing paramedic advanced life support services are provided by approved DPH services, and they come under the direction of twofold. One, they have to be approved by the state, and two, it has a medical control aspect. Dr. Kyle McLean is the medical control officer for paramedics out of Bacchus, and Middlesex also has a physician, and their job is to provide oversight with QC and QA to make sure that we're providing the best optimal advanced life support care, but also making sure that our BLS system is strong and it's in sync with that ALS system. Big thing is when available. One of the things we've been able to find out, and we'll show you and demonstrate to you today, is geographically where you are. There are some challenges sometimes with providing advanced life support services. The data's here, we're going to show you why. Current, the most utilized ALS provider actually comes out of Middlesex Paramedic 3 out of the Marlboro Clinic. It's 9 miles away, covering multiple towns, totaling 165 square miles, serving approximately 44,400 people. Where do we get these numbers? We get it from what the towns go to, what the ALS system goes to on a first response, and it's a large area. So you can see sometimes with that large of an area geographically that that system works, and primarily Medic 3 is based out of Middlesex, but if you listen enough, you can also understand that sometimes Middlesex Medic is going from one call to another and going down the line. Next call. First button. Here's your first ALS provider. Middlesex comes in out of the Marlboro Clinic. It's 9 miles away. The next closest medic is American Ambulance, 14 miles away. If they're unavailable, they can contact the Mohegan Tribe. After the Mohegan Tribe, when you look demographically for miles away, your next one is going to be Wyndham Hospital, 16 miles away. Can come out of Middlesex Hospital, 21 miles away. And the last one, you could also come out of L&N. When you look at the miles, and just some basic quick numbers to understand is, even at a mile a minute, you're looking at 9 minutes to get the paramedic here. Okay? And we all know that, yeah, are we capable of exceeding the speed limit? Sure we are. But we also have to operate that vehicle with all due regard. And sometimes on a night like tonight, the paramedic may not make it in 9 minutes. Chief, why is a paramedic needed? Colchester is a heart-safe community, and you should be proud of that. Your community has embellished the fact that you want to save lives, especially for people in cardiac arrest. Within that cardiac arrest plan, the American Heart Association talks about the chain of life, which includes early access to 911, CPR being performed at the scene, and then early defibrillation, either community or BLS, and then it's BLS and ALS, and the paramedic provides the ALS. In the American Heart Association Advanced Cardiac Life Support book, which is the current standard of care for cardiac resuscitation, there is a line in that book that says for every minute that a cardiac arrest victim is not revived, the chances to successfully revive the person decrease 10%. Think about previous map, think about the time, think about what you have now. Okay? Based on documented response times with a Colchester-based ALS response, the patient's revival chances could increase significantly. Now, we acknowledge that defibrillators make a big difference, but just because you defibrillate somebody doesn't mean everything's cool and you've successfully done it. Dr. McLean can tell you and other paramedics in this room, there is a probability that the patient will go back into cardiac arrest, and it's the paramedic that's capable of administering drugs to stop that cardiac irritability and keep the patient out of cardiac arrest. And on a very quick, successful cardiac arrest, a paramedic can also administer drugs to make the patient relax, be calm, and they can actually sedate the patient enough so that you don't tax the heart or the body more than having the patient gone through what they've been through being revived. Another example, something as simple as a diabetic emergency may need a paramedic. Why? If your blood sugar is low as 911 is called, an EMT can give oral glucose. The oral glucose is based on the level of consciousness for the patient. A patient has to be alert and verbal to give oral glucose. If they only respond to painful stimuli or they're unresponsive, you cannot give oral glucose because you have a high risk and incidence of aspiration. So in order to not give that, you can't give oral glucose, so now the paramedic arrives. What does the paramedic do? He turns around and he can give you intravenous dextrose or hormone injection to get their blood sugar up, to treat it till they become in a better state of consciousness where they may be alert or respond to verbal stimuli. But again, the big thing is, if you can't give the glucose, I can't reverse that low blood sugar, that hypoglycemic patient. When are paramedics needed? Keep going, Chief. Here you see columns of when a paramedic is needed, and this is taken right out of the current dispatch protocols of which your fire department is dispatched with. There are also some other exceptions. Required medical control responses. Dr. McLean is sitting at Bacchus and he sees an increase, and we'll all talk about that nice little syndrome going around called a rotavirus. A rotavirus is inundating the area lately, making people pretty sick. First of all, a rotavirus is dependent upon the equator and the season. Rotavirus is north of the equator from December to February, south of the equator from June to August. But a rotavirus can have a severe impact. In a paper written by Dr. Copeman for the Center for Disease Control, a rotavirus cost healthcare and a loss of productivity in 2015 greater than $60 billion a year because of the sickness is so debilitating. So if Dr. McLean's at Bacchus and sees all of a sudden a lot of vomiting, a lot of diarrhea coming in, and it's from your town, he may pick up the phone and say, Chief, do me a favor, for the next couple of weeks, maybe a month, you get a call for vomiting or diarrhea, especially from the ages of 6 months to 5 years or over 70, because those people are high risk for having debilitating problems from norovirus, please start your paramedic. So if Dr. McLean identifies something, he can say, hey, please make this part of your response, please get him going, and once we see it slow down, we can turn around and do it. Medical control can see the tendencies and trends, do a little bit of epidemiology, and figure out, do we need to put an intervention in to make things better. 2017. First of all, let me just tell you, we took the 2017 numbers because we started doing this presentation right after the first of the year. We don't still have all the data from 18. A lot of it's come in. We got 2 more pieces that once we get that information, we can share it with the boards if they like. 2017, 311 patients required transport by the Colchester Fire Department. All patient numbers, ALS patient numbers, would be significantly higher in these cases, as we've documented between the responding services 166 times there were no paramedics that reached the patient's side. This was either through canceled en route, the ambulance was going the other way, or where the medic was coming from. And that's another thing, with Medic 3, or even the ALS service coming, if they happen to be going the opposite direction or going somewhere else, you gotta hope that you got a service that's going that way towards your ambulance, wherever that destination may be. So wherever that destination is, if the ambulance is going, but the paramedic come from the opposite direction, it may not be advantageous to wait for that paramedic to arrive, continue to the transport. Within those numbers is also numbers that says they had no paramedic dispatch available to send to people in Colchester, and these are strictly from calls within Colchester. Based on current statewide demographic trends, demand for ALS service is rising. How do we know that? There is a correlation between elderly needing advanced life support and assistance and your town. Within your Colchester Plan of Conservation, when you looked at the demographic data that the town adopted and accepted the report on, your numbers are going up, which means that your patients and your residents that become a patient are going to need a little more assistance at providing advanced life support and helping them in a time of need. Responding to the scene and arrival times, these are numbers here. You see the Colchester Fire Department based on the INFRA's reporting system within the town, that the response time for Colchester is an average of 5.59 minutes. Caveat, we took all calls, including first and second calls. When we pulled data from the first available ambulance, in other words, both the ambulances were available, the crew was ready to go for the first ambulance, the response time was actually decreased by about 32 seconds. So it was 5:33 versus 5:59, and that's combining both ambulances. We chose to present you all the data from all EMS calls. The Middlesex Marlboro medic usually gets on the scene within 11, and that's about 11:45 for the American paramedic. If the Colchester Fire Department provides the ALS response time, you could safely say that the ALS arrival scene will be significantly better, and as you can see here, 6 minutes to 11 minutes puts ALS on the scene 5 minutes earlier. Next slide. NFPA standard is a standard that people refer to in regards to response times. We use in the 1710 because you're talking about staffing that would be 24/7 around, so we look to keep that standard. As you can see with 1710 looking at 8-minute response time, that the Colchester Fire Department would meet that. And again, it's nothing to deter from Middlesex or American, it's just that they have a lot more demographic area to cover. Next one. Why is time important? Cardiac arrest, STEMI, and I'll explain that. Stroke, pediatric emergencies, elderly health issues, motor vehicle accidents, the golden hour. ALS is important, and these are just a few examples. In the terms of a cardiac arrest, remember the first slide I showed you little EKG tracings? In those EKG tracings, if they feel for a pulse and there's no pulse within that patient, that's called pulseless electrical activity. The American Heart Association did a study and found that the revival of those patients are highly dependent upon the administration of epinephrine, the cardiac dose of epinephrine, and that the patient survival rates and revival rates increased the quicker the epinephrine was on board. They broke it down into 3-minute increments. If anybody's looking for that information, see me. I'll give you the reference, American Heart Association 2016 report on epinephrine in non-shockable cardiac arrest victims. STEMI. A STEMI is an ST elevation myocardial infarction. Paramedic intervention early is really key, and I'll tell you why it's key. Again, go back to that little EKG tracing. After the big high spike, you got a little blip, that's called the ST segment. That changes during myocardial infarction. An early recording of a 12-lead EKG, which paramedics are able to do, can initiate contact to Dr. McLean or the Middlesex hospitals, or wherever they're going, that they're seeing ST elevations, patients having a myocardial infarction, and they can be given their protocols to stop that MI. The tracings beginning early establish a clear-cut baseline over time, and they can also watch how the changes are made during the transport on the 12-lead within that patient. A stroke patient, depending on the age, depending on the stroke, on the onset of stroke, and also initiate a stroke protocol for a potential clot-busting drug. Pediatric emergencies could be the norovirus like we talked about, but the other thing with children is when a child goes along with a pulse and respiration, unfortunately for a child, they crash very hard. Why? Look at the size, look at the volume of the patient. Early interventions with an ALS for a really sick child can be very key, can be broken down into minutes. Elderly health issues, we talked about the norovirus and the motor vehicle accidents. We all talked about that golden hour of initiating advanced life support with good BLS, getting the patient to a skilled facility that can treat the trauma patient and successfully revive them from their injuries. In Colchester, you have two long-term care facilities. You have your Colchester Housing Authority, the Colchester Commons, and this is what you see. Another thing is, for a town your size, is you do have multiple special needs homes that I participate with, thanks to your fire department, every Christmas in a red suit, which I thank the fire department for. And you also have an entire education system. How many towns around you have an education system that may have just an elementary school and a middle school, but you have a high school? So you have an entire education system that is pretty well run, it's diverse, and it's got a good population, and you will look at the demographics within your town, especially based on the report in the previous slide we talked about. You're an up-and-coming town. Providing ALS is a win. Why is it a win? Early intervention equals more lives saved. Increased ALS responses. By you providing ALS, you're going to get more ALS quicker to more calls, and you're going to see the number of the missed calls decrease within your town for getting that paramedic to the patient's side. Advanced patient care. For those that don't know, the initial standards for paramedics and EMTs actually came from the Department of Transportation in the federal government. They were the ones that set the standards. They were the ones that talked about the golden hour and the paramedics. In the book, in the standards when they were first initiated, they have a statement, and that statement says, the paramedic is the eyes, ears, and hands of the emergency room physician. Can't be any better put than that. Can reduce patient hospitalization time. The earlier intervention of ALS can reduce the patient's hospitalization time. It could take a normal, some sort of injury or illness, and instead of exacerbating, depending on the progress of that injury or illness, the patient's actual hospitalization time can be reduced. Currently in the Colchester Fire Department, under the chain of command, you see the system of which they have. In this, on the right corner, you see the paramedic supervisor. The paramedic supervisor would be a dual role system that would work in conjunction with the assistant chief, the deputy chief, and the fire chief to provide all the necessary systems to deliver it. The assistant chief of EMS in the fire department is a position that he needs to be strong, and they are strong, because it's basic life support before ALS. But as that bullet says in the middle, strong basic life support results in positive ALS equaling positive patient outcomes. So there's definitely going to be a synergy between a paramedic supervisor that's doing two roles as a paramedic and a firefighter, and the assistant chief, who's going to make sure that the dovetail and the synergy between BLS and ALS is there and is strong. That's the key to a successful program. Paramedic supervisor program oversight. Again, it's a multi-skilled certified position providing paramedic and firefighter services. He would be responsible for QA, QC, medical oversight. What do we mean by medical oversight? He's going to be the contact person for Dr. McLean. He's got to work with Dr. McLean, he's got to work with the doctors of the hospitals to discuss any issues that are coming up, look at any tendencies and trends, and make sure that everything is going according to snuff. Let's be honest, what you learn in a book and what you have to treat in the field isn't always the same. We wish it was, but it's not. And then the training coordination between BLS and ALS. Again, you look at the assistant chief, which in the current structure within the Colchester Fire Department chain of command, and your ALS paramedic supervisor has to be strong, because again, I as a paramedic have never saved a life. It's been a team effort, and if I don't have good BLS people giving the oxygen, administering the bag valve mask, doing those basic life support skills, then I can't do my advanced life support. When that's in place, everybody wins. Program expenses, of course we endorse the program. And the other thing we include is the Colchester Fire Department believes it should include a minimum 18-month ALS evaluation period, compiling the revenue data that's been requested so that we can see where the tendencies and trends are going within the revenue generation by adding the service to the town. Staffing proposal. The initial paramedic plan would be to hire 2 full-time paramedic firefighters, provide an additional paramedic, and then supplement it with per diem paramedic firefighters and create a hiring list for transitional and future hirings. Okay? The program to work right now within Colchester, and Chief Cox can explain if you got some questions, but you actually have a person that could be transitioned out of the firefighter role into the firefighter paramedic role right now. If you add the other 2 and then you have a time slot to fill some per diem slots, you would have 24/7 coverage within your town. And the per diems could fill in when those openings occur. Chief. Initial one-time expense. One-time expense is $100,000, includes the ALS supplies that you need that you see noted, the initial medication inventory, narcotics. We talked about replenishing supplies, including an ongoing expense estimates. The full implementation plan would actually involve a paramedic response vehicle. Now, in towns of your size, one of the things we may last obtained from other people is your paramedic would best be served in what we call a response vehicle. He goes to the call. If he's needed, he gets on the ambulance and transports. If he goes to the call and it's a BLS downgrade where it's a basic life support service that can transport this, it now frees him up to stay available within your town. This is being done in a lot of other rural areas. There's been a lot of success in doing that, and it does get ALS to patients more. Now, Colchester will investigate and pursue all possible funding grants such as SAFR and AFG. Just as a note, West Hartford, Connecticut recently went from their paid fire department to a paid fire department providing ALS. They went ALS paramedic service in Colchester. One of the reasons they did it was they wanted to provide earlier ALS to their patients, but the town also saw a way that they can provide service. It wouldn't be extremely, the cost wouldn't be totally borne upon the town to provide that ALS service, that they were capable of also billing the patient under the current process that's done here in Colchester by doing bundle billing and billing the patient separately. Very successful in West Hartford. One of the things that they did that was very smart is they hired firefighter paramedics to begin their staffing as they went to ramp up their program and transitioned them into providing advanced life support. West Hartford is not the only municipality that provides ALS. There are others in the state of Connecticut that provide ALS and is provided by another service. Here in Colchester, you're looking to turn around and provide ALS into your transportation service already, and we'll explain the benefit of that in a few slides later. You see the first year initial plan is 350, 2 hirees, supervisor covers weekly shifts as well as being the supervisor position. And again, Chief Cox can answer questions of that when we come to it. The 2-year plan, currently there's 4 members of the Colchester Fire Department that are Connecticut licensed paramedics that will have the option to become part of the paramedic staff if this program is accepted and endorsed. Current CFD staffing, 71 members and 7 firefighter EMTs. In this staffing, you see numbers that encompass firefighting, emergency medical response issues, fire, police, and all those services. Hiring plan, it hired 2 additional paramedics. Total of 3. For the full plan is adding 1 more. And remember, one of the things that is also required by the state of Connecticut, ALS ambulance staffing requires 1 EMT and 1 paramedic. Someone may ask, why the EMT? If there's a significant issue where the patient deteriorates rapidly, the EMT driver can then pull over, jump in the back, assist the paramedic, stabilize or call for more assistance, and then continue the transport within the patient. That's why the state asks for that. Okay, task services of the Colchester Fire Department. Why is this important? Because what we're looking at here is we're looking at the picture in totality. We're looking at the big picture. When you look at everything that the fire department does and everything that they present, you notice that they are a very active department that provides a lot of services. And some of the other things that you see that they do is the hazmat, the fire suppression, the EMT care work, things like that. That's all well and good, but what about the public service they do? Flooded basements, power lines down, road closures, car seat installation. I was actually up at the department going over some of the data with the staff. Kudos, people actually came to the firehouse and said, hey, could you install my car seat for me? And they do. So there's a lot of other things that they do. Other things they do is they stand by for the varsity football, community events. They have the 57 Fest, tag sale on the green, the airline trail, Resolution Road, and Santa on the green. So, you know, as a community member, very diverse group, very dedicated group, they do a great job. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to break this part into 2 parts. First, I'm going to talk about the town piece and the financial piece and the numbers, and then I'll talk about the impact that it can have positive for the people of Colchester. What we did is we took the budgets from 2013, 14, and 18, we broke it down into the projected revenue, which you see listed there on the left, and then we had talked about the actual revenue that came in. One of the big things to note is the projected revenue versus the actual fiscal year revenue was higher. Within that higher, and what you see for those numbers, there is, why is it higher? It can be higher in a significant way. Yeah, you're right, because one of the things you don't know is, 1, what's the call volume? 2, aside from the call volume, what is the reimbursement that we're getting? In other words, what are the payers paying? What is coming into the town? So those numbers, to try to nail them down, to say, hey, we can nail these projections down, we know what they're going to be, it really depends. The other issue that's occurring is when you're in a service that has that bundle billing issue, when a patient gets 2 bills, it creates some uneasiness. But that 2 billing system also means that 2 people or 2 services have to be paid from 1 pool of money. So the disparities that are happening within that can be tough to manage and tough to understand. So to actually say that, geez, how can I project the budget revenue more? A, if I'm making a widget, I'm going to make $1,000 a month. I can tell you that I'm going to do $12,000 in a year. I can't tell you I'm going to go out and have to call 911 or have the people call 911 that many times in a year. Okay? The amount above proposed revenue for the last 5 years totals exceeded $293,605.68. It's an actual testament to what your town's accomplishing and what the service is doing. So within that, the actual 10-year numbers, which we took from down below also because we went back 10 years, the actual 10-year revenue generation, as you can see, is fairly significant, generating over $5 million in revenue to this town, averages to be about $514,000 a year. Where do we get the numbers? From the Colchester adopted budgets, revenue summary, charge for service, ambulance fees. I was asked to break down some numbers. I had a very good positive meeting with Mr. Tarloff and Andreas. So I was asked to break down some numbers, and we started doing it, and then we did it some more before we sent this slide set out on Friday. What you see before you is the budget year. Then the next column over has the adopted Colchester Fire Department budget and the population. The populations are important because in the populations, which come out of the Chatham Health District recognized town budget numbers, currently there are stipends that go to Middlesex to provide the ALS service. So it's important to know that there's also a fee attached to that stipend within the population. In the next column over, we talked about what would the cost per person be without any generated revenue. And you can see the revenues of anywhere from $80.43 per person down to 75.74 cents per person. When we took the revenue generated from the previous slide for those 5 years, the cost was reduced to 44.3%, $44.30 per person, $42.20, and so on. And again, those numbers come right from the budget of what it's generated. The budget year, again, adopted budget, the revenue generated, what's the return? You see the percentages before you. Another thing asked at the meeting is, well, how can we come up with projections? So, boy, it's a tall task. But what we did do is we took the historical data of your runs, okay? We factored in some key issues to that, and we've given you some baseline numbers of what it could potentially do. In 2017, now one of the things we have to acknowledge, rates set by the Department of Health and run numbers are on a calendar year. So to break it out by fiscal year, I'd be trying to do 6 months. So what we did is stuck with the numbers based on the calendar year, based on the reports, based on those numbers, based on the rates as set by the state of Connecticut, okay? 2017, they had ambulance calls total 1417. They transported 1,167 times, 311 were ALS. Why the difference between 1417 and 1167? How about assist? How about the alarm that goes off that they got to go check out life alarms? Those are all the calls that an ambulance responded to, but not every time they went through was a patient transport. Out of the 1,167 transports, 311 patients received ALS care through an intercept. In 2017, when we look at the 166 ALS patients that did not get a paramedic to their side, we said, okay, our goal would be out of those 166 patients, it'd be great if we can get 75% of the time ALS to that patient as a projection. So if we take a look at the 311 basic calls, we also identified that the BLS transportation rate and the ALS transportation rate has a deviation for the calendar year of $425. Okay? Now in the state of Connecticut rates, which we can go over a little bit later, is you have a BLS transport rate, you actually have 3 categories of an ALS transport rate, but you also have an intercept rate that is different, which you people use now in Colchester. So you got a BLS rate and you got an intercept rate, and we'll address that in a few minutes also. So we come up with a differentiation, and we realize that of those 311 calls, the revenue potential billable, just billable revenue, okay, is $132,000. Of those 166 ALS calls, if we could have got a medic 75% of the time, that could have generated $53,000 additional money for a total of $185,000. And again, those numbers increase based on availability, and they also increase based on the average state of Connecticut DPH maximum allowable rates. Why do we use the allowable rates? If I was to show you a rate sheet of the 2018 rates of all EMS providers in the state, just in 18, a basic life support transport went anywhere from $650 to $863. So I'll give you a figure. Do we acknowledge it's probably going to be less? But I had to give you at least what we're getting here on paper from the state to try to set up some sort of potential revenue generation. These projections do not include if you became an ALS provider in the town. Intercepts, which would be under mutual aid agreements, and also the fees for helicopter ALS assist. So in other words, if LifeStar comes to the town, there's also a fee associated for your paramedic to initiate care, provide the care, and then LifeStar would transport it to a higher level facility. So we looked at things again, and you saw the numbers I just talked about. In the second half, we broke it down again. Bottom one, the adopted Colchester Fire Department budget generated revenue plus 58% of the revenue potential. So what I did is, if you look at the top line with the red lines in, out of $185,000, the current collection rate for Colchester Fire Department for ALS is about 58%. So we only added 58% of that collectible funds that we think would occur to a potential revenue generation. So in 2017, the return to the town could go from 44.92 to 53.32, return back to the people of Colchester. So you can see it has a positive impact, but the biggest thing it's going to have is a positive impact on your patient outcomes. Next slide. Advantages for providing paramedic service in Colchester. Presently, a patient can receive an ambulance bill and a paramedic bill. The Colchester Fire Department bill is $743. The ALS intercept is $835 for a total of $1578. Again, we're talking about that two-bill syndrome. Next bullet. Currently, there are insurance companies that hesitate paying the intercept fee, including Medicare. Next slide. Patients will receive one bill for transportation and ALS services. That is key. It's key in many different ways, and we'll show you in the next slide. Patients could experience a decrease in out-of-pocket expenses because it's one claim versus two, but we'll show you how it gets there. A decrease in the total cost of the service example is, the two-bill total is $1578. That's for your BLS transport and your ALS provider, the other service. When you look at the ALS fee structure for a transporting service, the bill drops down on the average of those two. Remember I told you we averaged two of the ALS fees? The bill goes to $1046. Next slide. So that's a potential decrease of fiscal responsibility to the patient of $532. In talking to services, they do not see a loss of revenue by providing an ALS transport service because it's no longer they split into two services, it's the one service and the collection bill. So it does not hurt the town. We verified that with a couple of different services. The other big thing is you get a personalized interaction between Colchester residents and Colchester Fire Department staff. What better way can you say it's Colchester community members helping community members in need? Next slide. Okay. Town of Colchester, Connecticut plan presented in September 20th, 2016. The recommendation was to investigate BLS to ALS, and that's what we've done. That's what we presented. That was passed to the fire department by the strategic plan and shown to the town. In the state of Connecticut, the DPH plan also supports the mission of EMS expansion to ALS paramedic level, and demographically and geographically speaking, this is what we're showing you. Good. Implement time frame. You see this before you. We've already started some stuff as our fact finding to get things going. There's some different ways to do it. The SAFER grants and the AFG grants, if the town approves this and endorses this project, the fire department is going to need to initiate that right away because the open period to put in for those grants is open, and it can be a good fiscal benefit for the town. So, paramedic program, public education campaign. Social media, online social media, these are all things that we're currently doing, the fire department is currently doing to reach the residents. Other things they're going to do will be personal information sessions, you see listed before you. And during the time frame will be informational articles submitted to the various print newspapers and media sources that service the Colchester town. Summary. Data supports early intervention of advanced life support based on response times in Colchester. We demonstrated that. We showed you the difference in response times, but we also showed you examples of when ALS early intervention can be very positive for the patient. A decrease in the number of patients not having ALS response to their SOC. We talked about the missed calls, the transportation. We can improve that number and get ALS to more patients within your town. Early ALS to patient produces higher probability of successful patient outcomes. Now, when you talk about outcomes, one of the things that we found is what we call the ALS providing to services. In towns that rely on an intercept service, the ALS intervention is running in the 30 percentile, anywhere from 32 to 38%. And the towns that have ALS service associated with that transportation system, ALS intervention is actually used more because A, you're not missing calls, B, you're providing bigger service, So your ALS provider information and your ALS service to the patient is going to increase. And we verified that with a couple of services that have ALS within their transportation capabilities. A decrease in patient billing issues is projected, decrease in the total cost and out-of-pocket expenses. So what we talk about is, hey, geez, not only does it help offset the budget within the town and we can generate some revenue to provide the services, but we're also decreasing the fiscal liability to a patient and a Colchester resident who needs an ALS ambulance. Within cities and towns of Connecticut being limited on methods of revenue generation, you have a chance to increase your revenue generation and reduce the per patient operational cost of the Colchester Fire Department for its taxpayers. On behalf of the chief, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank a couple of people, Gene, Chief Cox, for asking me to get involved. I enjoy this stuff. It's part of my living. I'm a data guy. I love data. Had a nice meeting with Mr. Tarloff and Andreas. We're going to get them some more data, but I think basically, if I lived in this town, I would say this is a win-win situation. You can see the benefit to the town as well as the benefit to the patient. Thank you.
Thank you.
He needs a drink of water.
You need a water?
I got it right here.
Again, boards were allowed to ask questions with the presentation going on. I didn't hear any.
I have a, ready? To work?
Yeah, you're on. Get closer to you.
These are new.
Closer.
We don't know. Yeah? Thank you for the presentation. It was a lot of great information. I just have a question, if I may ask Dr. McLean, who took his time and energy to come here tonight to help promote.
Could you come up, Dr. McLean? It'd be easier if you had the podium, that way everyone can hear it. And we
If you don't mind. Thank you for coming to our session this evening to bring it up to the public, to promote this great service to our town. I'm just curious, what motivated you to join, to come, what would you like to tell us?
Sure.
Is our motivation, why would we want to do this for our town?
So I've been the medical director for your fire department since 2004, I believe. So I'm supporting you on the BLS level and potentially the ALS level. There's a continuity of care between the first responders, EMTs, firefighters, paramedics, aeromedical. And over the years, I have seen that Colchester in particular has, a challenge of ALS response time. There's a lot of different ways to fulfill that. Owning your own paramedic service is certainly one of them. From a medical control standpoint, I've been working with your department for a long time. I like the people, I like the town. I live in Hebron myself, so I'm close by. So I'm actually very much interested in being a part of the overseeing an ALS program here. I think it's a good fit for you medically. I think it makes a lot of sense. I do agree with Mr. Jaskowitz's presentation about response times. In addition to the heart attack information, I would add that paramedics that can be on scene quicker and also determine if you're having a particular type of heart attack. This should mean you should go that way versus that way, and time to cath labs. Trauma activations, there's a different level of assessment that builds upon that BLS framework that the ALS can add. Another thing that Mr. Jaskowitz didn't mention was sepsis. Sepsis has become a national focus. It's a really high mortality, and it's really particularly affects elderly people and people in skilled nursing facilities, rehabs. You have a lot of that in this town. Early recognition and treatment of sepsis with simple IV fluids and blood pressure support stuff can increase survival. So I see a lot of benefit to an earlier ALS intervention. So those are some of the few things that motivated me.
Thank you. I've been working with this.
Okay.
I have a quick question. I have a quick question.
Oh, I'm just going to go right down.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mike Egan. I've got a couple of questions. Again, what it seems like,
I came up two at once. We're learning.
what it seems like is In the towns in Connecticut, like Colchester, there are a number of towns that do not have, they have the first responders and the basic service, but they do not have the ALS. There are a number of other towns that do have the designated ALS service within their town. And again, if we, and it doesn't seem like the vast majority of those towns, not all of them are provided by the fire department or the volunteer fire department or the police department. A number of those towns actually contract out for the service. In fact, the vast majority of them do contract out for that service. Could you kind of go into the difference between actually contracting out for the service to, for example, a hospital or an ambulance service versus providing that in town and with the fire department staff, and what are the differences between the two?
Sure, you want me to try that?
One of the benefits that we're trying to do is, one, staffing issues within the department. The paramedics that we're hiring are multi-skilled, as you saw on one of the slides. In other words, they're firefighters. So during a downtime when not needed for ALS, they're doing firefighting services. So all we're required by the Department of Public Health is to have a first due paramedic on duty, which we're going to do 365, 24/7. So that's one benefit to that is if you commercial entities come in and provide paramedic services, they're paramedics only. They're not doing firefighter or other skills. So that greatly will help the taxpayers in getting more out of your tax dollars because we're able to provide with one person paramedic service and firefighting skills. One of the things, or several of the things we need to do with this process, we're applying to the Department of Public Health for our mobile intensive care authorization, which gives us the ability to provide paramedics, but we also want to secure our primary service area. That is the 49 square miles of Connecticut. We're one of the few towns in the state of Connecticut that doesn't have a designated PSA. We do for BOS, which is the service we provide now. So if the town of Colchester, through this application process, guides that, then the decision can be made whether they want, and we fully encourage them to choose the paramedic firefighter versus the commercial. Commercial entity comes into town, will provide ALS, but we're still going to the same amount of calls. If you listen during the slide presentation, one of the things we do on all medical calls is provide first response. We provide EMTs at the BLS level to the scene prior to an ambulance's arrival. And if a commercial entity came in and you awarded them the contract, we'd still be going to the same amount of call volume. So by providing the service ALS within our organization, we're actually recouping the money and it goes into the general fund, which I understand the money we do put in, if I understand correctly, just reduces the mill rate. So all the money that we generate, whether it's BLS or if we decide to go with ALS, the town of Colchester keeps within their geographic lines and their financial budget. That answers that question.
One follow-up?
Yep.
And again, just another follow-up. On a previous presentation, you did indicate that there is the potential for us to even branch out. Now, again, I noticed the town of Marlborough doesn't necessarily, even though we do get response from Marlborough, they don't have an ALS service in Marlborough, correct? That's designated to
Correct. I mean, you'd have to travel down to Guilford, Madison, if I'm correct, and that a fire department provides service or going towards the Hartford area. So,
Right.
yes, Medic 3 out of Marlborough, primary coverage, as was mentioned, is Colchester, Marlborough, East Hampton, and East Hampton.
Right.
So,
But, so in other words, when we have this ALS service, would we then be in a situation that our ALS service could actually provide those services potentially to other surrounding towns, or they would be restricted from operating within Colchester?
sure, absolutely they'd be able to. We do mutual aid right now. We've always done mutual aid. We sit in the northwest county corner of London County, so we're next to Hartford County, we're next to Middlesex County, and Windham County. So when our resources are strained or depleted, Other towns come into Colchester to provide services and vice versa. When they need us, they go in there. So absolutely, if somebody urgently needs a paramedic, I as chief of service will never deny that service if it's needed to a surrounding town.
And I also noticed the fact that there are some services out there that are provided by the towns that actually do provide that service to other towns. For example, I think Granbury Ambulance Association,
Yes.
they provide it to a number of other towns.
Correct. I believe you.
Can you hear me from here? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just a quick question. Your presentation was very informative, and we understand the benefits of the paramedic program, and we appreciate the presentation. I just have a quick question. The first year, the initial budget will be approximately $350,000, and the second year, you stated it would be about $450,000, correct?
Correct.
And I was wondering if you thought about how maybe you could streamline the department budget that you currently have, and if so, what do you think maybe you can use to offset the budget, or maybe just streamline the budget?
Sure. As a matter of fact, this year's fiscal year budget for 2020 has started. So we're going to start that process, and I'm sitting down with Art and Maggie Cosgrove on March 14th, because not only if this is implemented or its authorization is given to go forward, there's still the other budget that has to be managed. We can take a look and scrutinize the budget we have now and see what we can reduce. One of the things that needs to be explained about the different levels, initial $350,000 and then full implementation, is that we're going to be able, the best way sometimes to control or increase revenue is to control your expenses. There are things we can do once we're given authorization, i.e. to make decisions concerning the paramedic program, is instead of buying these EKG monitors that cost $36,000 a piece, we can actually lease these for 2 a month for approximately $1,500 a month. So in the course of a fiscal year budget, that's about $18,000. So you can see the decisions that we can make to help offset that. And yes, sitting down with the first selectman over the last several years in the budgets, I mean, we had some real serious discussions about sometimes budgets have to be cut, and we can make decisions to decrease our operating budget and to help implement this program that is, I feel is necessary. So yes, we can use fiscal responsibility and take a look at the different line items to address that. Go ahead.
Other quick points about that. The SAFER grants can give you additional funds for potentially up to 3 years to initiate a program and start your staffing. So you could actually help offset the cost of your personnel through a SAFER grant. Some of your equipment grants could go through AFG, but the thing that you need to do is those grant periods are open, and they're closing, I believe, like March 24th. So when the decision comes, it's going to be upon the chief, and he's got enough resources and people with experience to initiate those grant processes in a strategic move to help offset those costs initially to help the town. And then once you get going, when we talk about that minimum 18-month data, you can start reviewing the data, minimum 18 months, see where your revenue is going, and see where you can make adjustments within your budget within the fire department.
So, I'm sorry, just follow up. So basically, those grants can't be tapped until we authorize or time, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, you stated that there's certain procedures that have to be done after let's say that everything's approved at the town here. It has to go to the state for Connecticut authorization. What kind of process is that? And do you foresee any impediments or any setbacks?
To be honest with you, once the town endorses it and the DPH gets it, you have a great representative that's been an EMS pro advocate for eons, right, Linda? Okay? She's going to help us, as we say, kick the can down the street. We're going to get it. I believe with some good hard work, a little extra effort, you could be up and online to initiate 12, 19, 120, or 220 within that 3-month window, I think you could have ALS up, online, and running, and have your billing process in place.
Hello. Okay, we're good. First, I'd like to thank you. I know I make that much of an impression, but let's do this right. First, I'd like to say. Go ahead. All right.
Go ahead.
Can we hear me? Can you hear me?
I killed my mic. That's what it is.
First, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who showed up today to watch this presentation. Chief, I think you've done a wonderful job. Gene, you've worked really hard on this. And Charlie, great presentation. I just want to be the first, I guess, elected official who wants to say, Board of Selectmen, put this to referendum. Put it in our budget. I think our community deserves a first-class response program, and I think we're going to get it. And Chief has done a great job in this town, and I think we should put our confidence behind him.
No questions. Okay.
All right, then we're going to open it up to the citizens in the audience, and we're going to put a line down the center. If you want to come up and speak, come up and speak. I'm not looking for you to say that I'm in favor of this, because we will have that poll at the end of the meeting. If you have a question, if you have a question for the chief, please come up and ask your question. I don't hear no questions, so I think you're going to... Okay.
I can speak loudly.
Okay.
I don't need that. My name's Evan Evans. I live on Joseph Lane. I will say publicly that I said this is the last Board of Finance meeting. I don't care if the program earns nothing, not a dime. I'm in favor of it. I've seen enough people bleed out my life. I think we need ALS. But in full disclosure from the experts, what is the downside of this? What are the things that are going to be the challenges for the town so that people can make an informed decision?
Wow. Okay. Downside from what I see is you're not going to know what you need for staffing for a while, okay? Because with that 166 missed calls from 17, and then allowing the service to go mutual aid, you're going to have to watch it. You may have to actually initiate things, working with your Board of Finance and your Board of Selectmen. You may actually have to staff for some specific hours, hypothetically, on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday from noon to midnight. Because let's say in the summer months your call volume is up, or in the certain times of the day it's up. The only way you're going to get there is to evaluate that data. That's why you're talking about that 18-month period. You got to go through the 4 seasons. So if there's a downside, you may find out that you need more staffing, and how can we be creative to get the staffing put on and let it run appropriately. That's maybe the only thing I could see. But then again, if it's generating the revenue and it's providing service to your town, it may not really be a downside.
From a medical standpoint, I don't see any downsides. I also worked with the Middlesex Oaks for a long time. They do an excellent job, and I have nothing to disparage them at all. But I'm confident that a homegrown program here would provide the same level of care. The Bacchus Medical Control is part of Hartford Healthcare. We've done a lot of investment in EMS in the last year. We've started a program by which all of the runs from the ALS calls will be automatically, electronically transferred into our electronic record at the hospital, so we can immediately read them. The town, you will get immediate billing information to be able to make sure you correctly capture your charges. And also you're going to be able to get a copy of the discharge summary and the ED course of record. So your people will get 100% feedback on their medical care, and myself and the EMS coordinator, Jeff Way, will be very much involved. So from a medical standpoint, I don't see any risks or downsides at all, but also not to disparage that Middlesex has done a great job.
As Chief of Service, I don't look at it as a downside, I look at it as a challenge. One of the things that's going to happen if this is approved, and put in the referendum and people vote positively towards this, we're not going to be able to hire anybody till July 1 of this year. We can hire people. We're going to be hiring experienced paramedics to start off the program to make sure it's successful. But one of the things that Dr. McLean is tasked with is called precepting. So that challenge is to get competent people, and that sign-off is Dr. McLean's responsibility along with the paramedic supervisor. We also have the challenge of getting that authorization from the state. So when that happens, we cannot start providing paramedic service. So the first year is going to be definitely a challenge. And Charlie's right about staffing, but I think we can manage that with the amount of people that you saw for hire up there in the slide. So once the state of Connecticut may authorize this maybe in August or September, and then the doctor is okay with the employees that come through, it may take several employees coming through before you're okay with it. And that's the doctor's main responsibility here when it comes to paramedicine here is that he's confident in the people he's putting out in the field. So I have full confidence in Dr. McLean. Like I said, I've been working with him the same amount of time I've been chief of service. So I look at it as a challenge, which it's going to be. But the downside to me is an upsize. I mean, for the amount of benefit that this program is going to give the community, I think truly outweighs any percentage of a downside issue.
Is there any more questions?
Hi, everybody. I'm David Laspino. I'm a resident in town, and I'm also a career paramedic. I'm a clinical leader too for a very busy system, and I want to add a couple of things that are maybe a little bit sideways from some of the things that we've seen tonight, and kind of offer some additional concerns that I have not heard communicated. I am in support of the Middlesex Paramedic Program. I do not work there. I'm not an employee. But I am very familiar with a lot of the clinical proficiency that I think they bring into this community. My concerns with a new paramedic program would be cost, would be one. I think there's a lot of unknown costs. You've already talked about an unknowable, billable thing. I think that medical malpractice is something that we really haven't talked about. I'm concerned as not only as a provider and somebody who manages that on a supervisory level, but as a resident of the community. One paramedic screw-up can potentially cost a community a few $1 million. There's no shortage of examples where that has occurred over the years. And I think that that's anybody who's out there working as a medic, that window's open. I would rather have a paramedic with 20 years of experience, which I think we get a lot of with a lot of the Middlesex providers, render care in the community versus somebody who is either new or does not have that kind of clinical background. I'm concerned about unknown training costs. We really haven't approached that very, very effectively. They're expensive. As a paramedic, we throw out more equipment than we use because it expires and you can't use expired stuff. I don't think that's going to be a known quantity until you're kind of investing and you're neck deep in the water. I'm worried about potential downgrade of some of the services that Middlesex does bring in, RSI being one of them. I know that there's a lot of controversy surrounding medication-assisted intubation, but that is something that they have, that they offer the community. 11 minutes response time average for the paramedic coming out of Marlborough is clinically, that there's not a lot of calls where that's actually going to impact an remarkable number at the end of a year. It looks bad, or it's alarming on a spreadsheet or up on a PowerPoint, but in terms of how big the system is, 11 minutes is not that bad. And I don't want to put lipstick on a pig, but if we're looking at the end of a year, as a resident, I do not find that concerning with the collaboration of strong BLS, and that's what we have in this community, and that's good. Strong BLS does buy time. It doesn't just, well, these are 11 minutes, it's late, the patient has, a very poor outcome. That's not the way that it works. We talked about pediatrics. The vast majority of pediatric calls, we have nausea, vomiting, the viral GI kind of thing going on, requires supportive care. I know we're very concerned about children in the community, safety. We should not look to that number and say, you know, we're failing as an EMS provider in the community. The efficacy of epinephrine during cardiac arrest has been questionable for a long time. What does work is strong BLS, strong CPR, defibrillation with an AED. It's a heart-safe community. That's a good thing. We have that in place already. Just out of curiosity, what do we pay Middlesex per year for their services?
Right now, it's $1 per capita.
So
taking just the average population, Colchester is roughly 16,500.
Yeah. So $16,000 per year, 16.5 for the year for Middlesex. That doesn't even approach the cost of the cardiac monitors that you're talking about purchasing. You're talking about leasing them for $18,000 a year. That's still more money than we are paying Middlesex to come in and provide a level of care that I know that they provide. So guys, those are my concerns. I do support our fire department. I think they do a fantastic job. I think working collaboratively with Middlesex is what I am in support of to continue to do what they do. I'm also concerned that we will become the de facto paramedic provider for all the other surrounding communities that cannot afford to do what you guys are proposing. I want to help our neighbor. I think that's important to do mutual aid, but I'm concerned that the paramedic would be out doing calls in surrounding communities more often than they currently are doing now because they're the paramedic that's closer and they're not using Middlesex. So I don't want to be a naysayer. I just want to voice my concerns as both a resident. I'm a little more informed than I think the average person who will stand up here and talk aside from the panel here. So that's all I got, guys. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Could I respond to those statements, or is this a different forum?
Could you please respond? I'm not holding again.
Oh, no, I'd really like to. Excellent points. Thank you very much. So working backwards, I'll hit as many as I can remember, and please, I welcome anyone to remind me of the ones I missed, because I think I had an answer to most of the ones you said, if not all. So as far as cost of Middlesex versus making your own, what you should do is also figure in the additional that you're asking for. You're saying that you're 11 minutes, and then there's also missed calls and missed intercepts and missed paramedic ALS responses. So you have to figure in the full cost of asking Middlesex to give you another, at least one, if not two, responses. And then you have to weigh that. I think that would be the honest thing to do in that situation. Next is level of care. All services have different levels of paramedics, you know, new hires, newly graduated, and ones with many, many years experience. And Middlesex has an excellent crew. The body of paramedics that Colchester would be hiring from, as was said, are all experienced providers. I know and have trained more than 10 years ago, almost all the ones that I know they're looking at, because I've already been over the list myself, and they're all very experienced providers as well. And the initial crew that would be working in Colchester would only be those with several years of experience. And I'd be very confident about those. As Chief Cox was mentioning, the precepting process, which is the same at Middlesex and Wyndham and L&M and other places throughout the state. Each place determines what it is required to assess and ensure the competency of their providers, and then a medical control that oversees them on the medical control for Bacchus and the East Region around here. But also every place has their medical director of EMS that assures that the precepting process generates a paramedic that you're willing to give medical control to. So to the town of Colchester, you would never get a paramedic with medical control that wasn't appropriate for the level of care that's needed in the town. And that's going to be true with any service, Middlesex included. They're going to take newer hires in and precept them and assure their competency over time too. So I would assure that we do the same. What other things are on the list? So cost. the level of care.
Liability.
Minutes not mattering.
What's that?
The minutes not
Oh, at the
mattering.
time. So, gentleman was correct. There has been a look over the years at response times, and there has been some debate over which response times are most important. And it's not universal that a couple minutes is always going to make a difference. But my thought, and what I teach and what I believe in our medical control, is that the level of assessment is what we're all measured on, not by the monkey skills or not by the toys or not by the drugs. It is the level of assessment. And each level of EMS provider has an escalating level of assessment, including emergency physicians, including the next line down the road, the internist, the cardiologist, the neurologist, neurosurgeons. So what you're going to bring is a much quicker level of assessment. And nowadays, as we're evolving the quality and standards of care in many different disciplines, whether it be STEMI, stroke, sepsis, trauma, it's also that initial assessment that then determines where you're going to go. You can actually pick different hospitals and different levels of care, and coming down the road is also maybe alternate care. Maybe there's a place where you should go besides a hospital. Maybe there's extension of paramedic services in the community. And it comes down to the level of care and level of assessment, and that's where you're going to get to the scene faster. You can hire additional, people from Wyndham or American or L&M, but you're also going to be asking them to come and park somewhere in the town or be close by, just to say that they're tagged for you. Are they going to be here? Are they going to be close? Are they going to be, if it's snowing like tonight, is that going to really add on? How much is it going to add on from Colchester versus from a second one designated from somewhere else? They're all reasonable questions, but from the medical care standpoint, I am confident that you're going to get the same level of care. As far as pediatrics, also, level of assessment in pediatric patients is very challenging, and there are fewer really, really sick pediatric patients in the world nowadays. As Mr. Jaskos did mention, when they're sick, they're very sick, and they're very sick quickly. So I still support a faster response for that. RSI, the intubation of patients in the medical literature that has really, really suffered in the last several years. And being a pro-EMS person, there's part of me that wants to defend interventions that we do at the ALS level. But to be truthful, it is, with every subsequent paper over the last almost 10 years now, less and less support of pre-hospital RSI. I still support Middlesex and Wyndham that still do it. I think they do a good job, and they do enough of them where they get good quality assurance. In our particular region here, what I've found is that the average number of intubations per year for a paramedic does not meet a threshold that is consistent with a good quality practice of oversight and benefit. For things like head injury, we find that when we intubate people, they frequently have a worse outcome, and with some other things with trauma as well. So that's an open moving target and open for continual following of the best medical practices. But that has across the country been challenged in the medical literature significantly. What else did I miss? Liability comes with medical control. Medical control is your medical liability protection.
Epi and CPR?
Epi and CPR, gentleman was correct. The best outcomes for cardiac arrest are in early effective CPR and early defibrillation. And when you look at drugs in cardiac arrest, drugs in a lot of other things, their efficacy has been challenged over time. I can't really argue with that.
Training?
Backus Hospital Medical Control, much like Middlesex, has a robust regular training program. We require monthly attendance at CMEs, and we actually, I would actually boast that with our affiliation with Hartford Healthcare, we're the first what they call CAPC accredited healthcare system in Connecticut. CAPC is the Universal National justification for continuing education for all levels of EMS providers. When they go for the National Registry, they need to have CAPC accredited education. And Hartford Healthcare has become a CAPC accredited organization just this year. So we're going to be offering quality education, I feel like we always have, but we're actually offering it at a nationally certified level where they can take their credits anywhere in the country, and even other countries sometimes too, as saying that you have CAPC associated credits. What that means is that all your speakers have a CV, have literature support, have peer review of the material that they're presenting, and it's our intention in Hartford Healthcare to actually take the best speakers from, the director of neurosurgery and neuroscience at Hartford to do stroke talks. So, the stroke stuff will be from there. If there's somebody great at Charlotte Hungerford or Midstate or HOCC or us or Wyndham, anyone else in the system that has the best speakers and the best education, we're all going to share that, and we're going to provide it at that CAPC level. So education, we also have the SIM Center at Hartford Hospital that we're looking to spend more and more time in with EMS. So being part of a large organization, we actually have one of the richest access to education, second to none in the state actually. And I'm really pleased to say that I've been around for the process of begging that for years, and I'm actually really pleased that we're getting there just this year. Did I miss anything else? Sorry, thanks.
I'd like to agree with that gentleman there. I think the Middlesex paramedics are some of the best, if not the best paramedics in the state of Connecticut. Jim Santa Croce, who's here, was a paramedic that I rode with when I became an EMT in the early 1990s. The question is not their ability or their skill in being a paramedic, it's their unavailability sometimes, and that's just the nature of the business right here. To have 166 times in 1 year where Middlesex paramedic was not available is a risk to me. Talking about malpractices, we were at a scene a month ago in a serious head-on crash in Lebanon Avenue. We had a paramedic on the scene. One of our members is a licensed practicing paramedic. He could not practice paramedic skills. It took over 11 minutes to get a paramedic there. This is not a slight against Middlesex. They're great paramedics. It's about what I feel as chief of service. I don't want to be a chief that has to tell a parent or some loved one that why didn't you get a paramedic there in that 5-6 minutes? It may not mean nothing to you or statistically, but to a loved one it does. That we tried our best to provide a service to save someone's life. As far as malpractice, every time our emergency vehicles roll out of the fire station, we're at risk for suit. I don't care what it is. It could be a driving incident, it could be a hazmat incident. I believe in the leadership that we have. I believe in Dr. McLean, his QA, and his quality assurance that we're going to get good paramedics that are going to do the best they can. Every town in the United States is at risk of liability. It happens in law enforcement, it happens in the fire department, and anything else. And risk can be managed. Nobody wants to see that, but it's something that comes with providing public safety service.
Is there any more questions?
Hi, my name is James McNair. When I used to run a business and some of our vendors didn't provide service, and I went to them and said, look, we don't like your service, we're going to do it on our own. It was always interesting how all of a sudden those service providers sung a different tune. So I'm just a little curious, how has Middlesex and Bacchus and other service providers reacted to the fact that they might be losing their revenue stream with respect to Colchester, Connecticut?
I don't know if Jim wants to speak of that, but as far as American operating out of Norwich, they're commercial service. They're in business to be in business to make a profit. We are not. We're told we're supposed to run our organization as a business, but we're critical infrastructure. We provide municipal service.
That part I get, but I guess my question is, have you approached those service, because clearly,
yes,
Okay, and they basically said, go pound sand?
No, they did not. You'd have, I think Rob Tarloff and Art Schlosky sat down with American, okay? And they were looking for some figures that we can't provide, because we've never provided ALS service. I can tell you, American is the secondary choice of paramedics here, because Middlesex out of Marlboro are here quicker. That 100 times a year, we ask them to come here. 50% of those times, they don't make it, because their units are located in Griswold, whatever, they gotta come to Colchester. So, as far as losing money, the money in commercial service is transferred facility to facility. That's something we're not licensed to do. That's where they make the greatest amount of money. So there are other things that commercial services can do ambulance-wise that we cannot do, which is transfer facility.
All right, well, thank you. Yep. All right. It is a good program, and I'm a little selfish, being in my 60s.
Age 60s.
Yeah.
He's a young guy. He's a young guy. What are you talking about?
I'm not saying anything.
Is there any more questions? Okay. The last two items on the agenda is, one, we would like to take a straw poll for people who are in favor to just raise your hand. Your hand, not two. And it's just to get the general idea of what the public is looking for. Is this for a yay or nay? Yay? It's a good question. I really don't think. Well, no, I'd say it was the majority of the people, and even the EMTs in the back there are voting. Is there anyone that's against the paramedic program?
I just don't think we have enough information yet. That's all.
Undecided?
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying from what I've heard today, there's a bunch of material, there's a bunch of data that's missing. So we've got costs of medical supplies that need to be turned over, the cost of training, liability. It doesn't seem like we have enough in order to properly budget it. And if we're only looking at 2-minute delta for what we're getting today, seems to be pretty good, as opposed to taking on that additional liability ourselves.
I just want to undecided. The questions are over with. So, okay. I thank everybody for coming. It's important for the town. Both boards appreciate it. Gentlemen, you did a fine job. I would make a motion to adjourn. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we got the Board of Finance meeting.